He's a wild hummingbird, but in the time that I was out here, and especially a lot more time during the COVID, we became friends. He's very territorial. He has his own private feeder behind me. He doesn't let anybody else near it, and he's a small little guy, but he's full of fire. And he actually comes a lot of the times when I'm outside doing some of my coaching calls. He'll fly up, and if he wants some attention, you may see him come up. He'll flutter in front of me, and then he'll look at all of you. And on 3 different occasions, he's actually landed on my MacBook Air and blocked the camera, where he lands on it and puts his tail feather over the camera. So it's and it's been recorded. So we're going to get that recording sometime. So if it happens, don't be surprised, because he was just here. He just took off because he heard me talking, going, "I've heard you before. I don't need to listen to you anymore." So in doing this, Ryan and I had an opportunity to actually get to know each other at an event called the Secret Knock in San Diego. And then we started to develop a relationship. And so what you'll find, what many of you guys do, I think already, and what I do and what I've been doing for years, is building relationships, building rapport, giving first. And so there's a number of acronyms that I'll be using here. And I have to tell you, years ago when I was in a training with Tony Robbins that he hasn't done for a long time for a certification, Tony uses a lot of acronyms, and it used to drive me crazy. I'm going, dude, just say the words, okay? But you know what? The reality is, and as the more that I began to develop my own set of acronyms, it's easier to recall. And what I want is, I want to have a situation where if I'm in the middle of something, I'm not going to have to think of the words or the sequence that they're in. If I remember the acronym right off the bat, I can immediately go into what I want to use that language for. And I'm really big on what kind of language we use. Semantics matter. And especially when I'm in negotiations, or if I am with I was with 2 clients last week. And one is speaking Chinese and the other one is speaking Spanish. Now they're actually speaking English, but it's so different on how they language their words and what they use and what the meaning is to them. So what I was doing was playing the interpreter. One is one of the most brilliant stem cell scientists, and the other one is one of the most brilliant stem cell doctors. But they were still speaking different language, where I would have to stop them in the middle of that and say, okay, wait a second, let's be clear that we're all talking about the same thing. What I hear you saying is this what you mean? Now, that clarification, and just for you, when you're doing this, especially if you're with clients or just in general with talking to people, to make sure that you're getting very specific information. It may sound anal. It makes the difference between a deal and a relationship, or losing both. Okay, so you want to be clear about that, because especially if you're moving along in a direction where you think that you're doing something and you're all rowing the boat in the same direction, you may find out later on that's not the case, and now you've lost a lot of momentum. So, and I want to share something too real quick. And when I talk about rowing the boat, I can't remember the guy's name, but this is what he was doing when he learned how to do crewing and rowing. The question he asked himself during this time: does it make the boat? Does this make the boat go faster? And he did a TED talk on it. You can go back and look it up, and probably put just, does it make the boat go faster, and find it. And I thought it was really relevant, because it makes him stop. And now I'm doing this with my clients. I'm saying, okay, is what we're doing, is it making the boat go faster? And if the answer is no, we stop and go, okay, let's not do that. Or how do we do it differently? Now, I've had something in one of my things that I've been using for years that I call COFA, C-O-F-A. COFA stands for closer or further away. And what I would find myself doing a number of years ago was, randomly, I would just stop whatever it was that I was doing, and I would say the word COFA. And it would center me, it would ground me at that moment, to get me to pay attention to where is what I'm doing right now getting me closer or further away to my desired outcome, to whatever it is. So I don't know about any of you. I have tendencies to get distracted by shiny objects and the 2 squirrels that just went by, and I didn't even look at them when they went by, right? But the point of that is that if we're getting distracted and getting off course, how do we use really simple tools to be able to do that? So COFA worked really well for me. The challenge was I had to do it while I remembered it. right? I had to kind of sit there and say, okay, COFA. And instead, what I did is I just took Post-its and I put COFA on it, and I would put it up on one on the big screen TV, one on my laptop, one on the mirror inside the bathroom, one on the refrigerator. So it was a constant reminder going, okay, is everything that I'm doing right now keeping me, getting me closer or further away from my desired outcome? Now, I don't live my life by that, but it certainly helps in keeping focused for those of us that do not do a focused attention as well as others. So that was a big deal for me. One of the things that Ryan learned from me that he came up and he utilized, and he can share whatever that might have been at one point, is the thing that I call CPC, which means clues, patterns, and choices. So you begin to identify certain things in people's behavior, in their language, in their mannerisms, in what you might be doing in a personal relationship or in negotiations. And I'll use it in negotiations a lot. So the first thing is when you look at clues, you begin to see a set of clues. And once those clues form a pattern and you recognize that pattern, you're going, okay, here's the pattern. It's a pattern I'm familiar with, or it's not a pattern I'm familiar with, right? Now, when you recognize that it's a pattern that you're familiar with, the last C is choices. What are my choices at this point? Now, for me, depending on any given situation, I want to have 3 default choices. And the reason I do that is not because I can't think through it, but what if I'm in a heightened emotional state? What if I'm mad or something else is going on that could be influencing how I make my decision? And if that's the case, I want to have these 3 defaults because I've already thought in advance. If I'm in a given situation where I'm in this position, instead of me going and trying to figure that out, I'm just going to use one of the 3. 3 is simple. 3 is easy. 3 is a very powerful number. And you'll see, depending on how far we go on this, that I use 3 in a lot of different things. So that gives me my choices to immediately go back into. And I'll share where that works in something I call F the how too. And as entrepreneurs, I find that this is a pretty big deal. I speak about this a lot at, some of you may know who Roland Frazier is. Roland has one of the businesses he has is called Consulting for Equity, and I speak at that event regularly. And so I incorporate these things in sharing with the group. So the thing that I would encourage all of you to do is, if I share something today that you find that's going to be useful, try it. Start beginning to use it right away. Incorporate it. If you don't find anything useful, hopefully I was entertaining enough to where you just sit there and go, okay, this guy's full of it, but hey, you know what? He kept us entertained for a few minutes. Either one is good with me. I don't get attached to the outcome. So the thing with in consulting for equity, what I found was a lot of people have a challenge with, and some of you may relate to this as entrepreneurs or small business owners, is that we have an opportunity that either is placed in front of us, somebody brings something to us, or we happen to see or get in we just recognize, man, there's an opportunity here. Or maybe you don't recognize at first that it is an opportunity, but you put it in the back of your mind. And what I find is a lot of people, even really, really, really smart people, we can't be good at everything. We don't have experience at everything. And so what happens is that people will have that opportunity. They start to move towards it or start to think a little bit more about it. And then they go, man, I don't know how to do this. And I don't know how to do that. And I don't know how I'd find this. And they howl themselves right out of a deal, right? And so I say, F the how. If you look at how in school, and I didn't do well in school because I don't learn the way they teach, but I remember who, what, when, where, and what was the last thing on the list? How. So I always make how the last thing on the list. I don't need to know how to do something to start making something happen. And I'll give you one, I'm going to give you one of many examples where this works. Where it's real. I'm not going to give you theory. I'm going to give you actual experiences that I've done this in throughout my life, even as a young guy. And a few years ago, I was on a flight from New York to LA. And I'll share a little something about that too, about why you should all be flying first class or business class whenever possible. And it's not just because, you know, you're a diva. It's because that's where the business is done, at least for me. So I'm flying up in first class from there, and I'm flying back, and the guy, my seatmate next to me, I don't remember John's last name, but John was the CFO of Virgin Mobile. And Virgin Mobile, which was obviously Richard Branson's company, he sold it to Sprint, to their Boost division, which was their prepaid mobile division. And this is a process that I go through constantly with, I meet somebody where I may not know how to do something, but I recognize how to find the pain point and turn it up and get some opportunity to find out how to do it later. So John, the CFO there, he and I were chatting, and the first thing you need to do is you've got to develop rapport with that person. Because if any of you have ever been on a platform, it's not as popular anymore, but it's called Clubhouse. It was very popular during the pandemic, and I resisted coming on there for a long time. And when I finally did, I knew a lot of the bigger players, and they would invite me up on the stage, and I would share some things, and I wasn't looking for business. And people would look at my bio, which doesn't talk about me, but it talks about building that relationship. And one of the things that I talk about why people think that proximity is power. Proximity is powerful. But here's the bottom line. If you don't develop rapport, you could be sitting next to a head of state, a major influencer, or a CEO of a Fortune 100 company, right next to them, literally inches away. If you don't develop rapport, if you don't develop credibility and how to move that conversation to a place that is productive and that isn't interesting for that person next to you, it doesn't matter that you're literally inches away. You will never, ever, ever leverage that relationship. How many times have we been on flights where we're sitting right next to somebody and there's never a conversation to be had? How many times have you been sitting there where it's on it, where they either put on their headsets or you put on your headsets? You don't want to be bothered. You're trying to get work done. I get that. Okay, but you can assess that pretty quick by the person you're next to, by having a conversation with them as to whether or not, first, do you add value to them, which is ABG. ABC, most people use in sales, always be closing. I hate closing. I don't want to feel, I feel like when I'm closing, what am I doing? When I'm closing something, I'm closing the door. I'm closing. It means closing. I am not opening. So the first thing is ABG, always be giving. Always give freely of something. Don't be afraid. Don't come from scarcity. Come with that to where you can always give something to somebody, because what it materializes into is either something that you can build with that person, or that they're going to talk about you to somebody else that might be really relevant and can help you out with your business or your life. ABL, first thing you should do is always be listening. Listen 5 times, 7 times more than you talk. And let me tell you something, for somebody like me, that can be a challenge. I'm a speaker coach, and I like doing that, but I've learned to have the discipline to listen more, to take in that information so that I'm sharing something back that's relevant. So going back to developing that rapport, and when you're listening, you can chime in. And when you ask really good questions, people have a tendency to believe that you're really interesting. When you act interested, they perceive you as being really interesting. So now when you develop that, no matter what it is, and it doesn't matter whether you have experience in their area, whether they happen to be a super genius with an IQ of 147, it doesn't matter. They are humans. They want to engage unless they have, and this is a thing when you're looking at CPC, clues, patterns, and choices. Some people don't want to be spoken with. Some people just want to shut it off. Some people are just, some people are Asperger's. They don't, they're just not going to communicate with you. It's not you, it's them, but that's okay. All right. But pay attention to it, because if it goes to where it is you need to shut up and listen more. So as you develop that, and what I was doing with John was I would talk to him. We've developed that, what was going on. Where was I coming from? I was just coming from London. And he was coming out because he lived in New York and he was going out to LA to see the family. So I listened to these things and asked him a few other questions. How long have you been in New York? What part of LA do you live in? And then we get into, so what's your interest? What's the business you're in? And he tells me he's the CFO of Virgin Mobile. I go, oh, that's great. And he's asking me at the time, what were you doing in London? I said, well, one of my speakers that I was coaching, we just had a big event at the O2 Arena. We had 7,500 people. And we were talking about entrepreneurship and how to grow your businesses. And so he would ask questions about that. And so how long you've been coaching speakers? We went into different things. And he said, do you think you could coach my CEO? He really needs help. And I said, I can coach anybody that's coachable. But then I wanted to get more into their business. I said, so you're Virgin Mobile and you're over here. I understand. I go, so tell me about that. And he goes, well, Richard sold the company 2 years ago to Sprint. And so now we're part of the Sprint Mobile division. And I said, so you came over with the company? He goes, all of the C-level people came over with the company. And I said, so was Richard involved in that in the hiring? He goes, yeah, Richard, in this level, in the C-level, Richard's always involved in the hiring. He handpicked every one of us in the C-level. I said, oh, that's awesome. So now I want you to pay attention to this. This is something that's really important when you get into identifying a pain point and turning it up. So the one question I ask always, what's your biggest challenge? I don't say what your biggest challenge is, because if I say what's your biggest challenge, what are the biggest problems that you're trying to find, they're going to go, well, we're dealing with this and yeah, we got this, and you're going to make them have to think about that. And it will dilute where the pain comes from, because it's coming from multiple directions, but that's not what you're interested in. You're interested in finding that one hyper-focused pain point, because that's going to be the thing that's at the top of their list. That's at the top of their list, and that's where you want them to start to focus. So John says, our biggest challenge is, since being over at Sprint, we are reactive rather than leading. He goes, and I said, okay, that's interesting. And by the word, that word I used was intentional. It's very ambiguous. When people use the word interesting, what does that mean half the times, right? But I said, interesting. I said, so what I hear you saying, tell me this, is that you guys are reacting to the marketplace. Where does that place you in the marketplace? And he goes, well, it puts us in a position, it places us where we're kind of playing catch up. I go, wow. And this was intentional. When I take a deep breath, man. So you feel like you're falling behind. Yeah. We're not ahead of the marketplace like we used to be or should. And I go, that's gotta suck. And he goes, yeah, well, yeah, it does. It sucks. And I go, no, that's really gotta be bad. That's really gotta suck. And he looks at me and he goes, why do you say it like that? And I said, well, here's what I heard you say. It's Virgin Mobile. It's Richard's company. Virgin's always been the brand of Richard. Richard Branson is an innovator. He's the guy that's always leading the industry, right? Or creating, being that innovator of new technologies, new ways of doing marketing, new ways of everything, right? And he's a risk taker. I said, so you told me that Richard handpicked all of you, and yet since he sold you to the company, he expected, I'm assuming you went with the company because he expected you to carry on his legacy over there and continue to be the head of the pack. And he goes, yeah, I guess so. I said, how do you think Richard feels about this? And his face began to drain. And then I started just going, so Richard Branson's always been this innovator. He's the leader. He's the developer. He's never been the guy behind. I mean, he may start off where he's smaller on something, but he's the guy that everybody looks at. And I would imagine that Richard's back there thinking, wow, did I make a mistake? Now this guy's face is contorting and you can just see the pain is just building. And that's where I wanted to take it. Now, is this manipulative? Yes, but it's to get to a point to where I now have leverage. And here's where we go with this. What do I know about, besides having a device and that I use it, and what do I know about the carrier industry? Nothing. I mean, a little, but not really. So what value would I be to Virgin Mobile? Seriously, to this guy? So by asking these questions, and what I was able to do, and this is something all of you can do, especially if you've come across something that's probably different and innovative. Maybe it's a way that you've done business. Maybe one of your clients, maybe somebody you're working with is doing certain things. I was part of a mastermind called War Room. War Room was with Ryan Dice, Perry Belcher, and Roland Frazier, and it was one of the top internet mastermind groups, internet marketing mastermind groups there. So I knew a number of the guys that were in there that were doing tests. They were testing things that nobody had ever done before, because they were the ones that came up with the idea on how to test it. So where am I going with this? Where I'm going with this is when I started asking John, okay, so let me ask you this. In your marketing, are you guys doing this? And I'm usually going to ask questions that I think that they don't know, or if they do know, I know how to move around it. He goes, no. I go, what, are you doing this in your marketing? He says, And I said, are you doing this in your marketing? He goes, I've never even heard of that. Can we hire you? And I go, yes, you can. But here's where we went next. I said, couple things. I want to ask you a few more questions. So I want to tell you a few things, and I want to ask you a few questions. Number one, you need to know this. I want to be very upfront with you. I'm not the expert of those things I just asked you. I'm familiar with them, and I have the people. I have a team of people that I am so very close to, that these are the innovators of their industry, of what they do. And I have access and influence with them to bring them in. And so the things that I'm talking to you about, while I may not be the one to perform them, I have the one that can bring it all together. Okay, so you see how I'm doing that. I don't have the how, but I know the people to be able to do that. And I said, so first off, let me ask you, what were your sales like last year? He said, we weren't the biggest or the best, but we did okay. We did $10 billion in sales. I went, oh, nice. Second thing is, I said, what are your margins like? And he said, our margins are effing great, our profit margins. And I said, now that's music to my ears, because is it possible that if we run a couple of tests with you at some point, that we can do that we can do based upon performance on how much we move the needle on what we can share in that? And he goes, absolutely. Right. So you see now, how much do you have to move a needle with a company that's doing $10 billion in sales that has really, really great margins? Not much. Not much at all. So now I haven't locked him into anything. I'm not saying, okay, well, this is how you hire us, and here's what we're going to do, and I'm going to have a contract. Screw all that, right? So now the next thing is, how much time do I need in order to go ahead and get together with those guys, do some research, and pull some things together? So when he would say, well, so what's the next step? I said, you know what? I'll tell you what, John. Why don't I really think this is super important. This is a big deal for you, and I want to make sure that I'm respectful of your time and your team's time. Let's go ahead and reconvene in a couple of weeks. I'll get back to you. I'll get some more information, and then we'll see where we go from there. So what I just did is I stalled. I stalled for 2 weeks, and it was all sounding natural to him. Well, of course that makes sense. I told him, I respect your time, so I don't want to waste your time. So I need a couple of weeks to make sure I can do my research. Can I do a lot of research in 2 weeks? Yeah. Can I talk to a lot of people? Yes. Can I find out what the other carrier services are doing in their marketing, at least what's available out there? Absolutely. Can I hire a VA in the Philippines to handle that for me, to do all the research? Of course I can. Of course you can, right? All of us can. So I'm not, the only how I'm doing at that point is identifying more of what the market looks like, so that when I have the next conversation with him and his team, I have something of substance to share. Worst case scenario, worst case is that if I couldn't come up with a way that could be a potential solution for them, I have developed a new relationship. I have an inroad to a guy, by the way, CFO, the guy that signs the checks, right? I'm talking to a decision maker. So now I have an opportunity, whether it's that time or something in the future, that we now have a rapport and relationship credibility. Am I going to follow through in that 2 weeks? No, I'm going to follow through within the next week to 10 days. I want to tell them 2 weeks. I want to get back to them sooner, right? But I don't know how to do what it is that they need. So I can give you, we don't have enough time on here, but I can give you example after example after example of where I've done that. Now, let me tell you the rest of the story. I went back to War Room because I knew we were meeting up in Austin to do that. And I presented it. Back then, there was only about 30 of us. And I want you to think about this. These guys were brilliant at internet marketing, and I presented this opportunity. I said, I'm dealing with a decision maker. I've got his cell number. We had a great talk. We spent 6 hours together on the flight, right? So in that, when I presented the deal, I presented it just like I shared with you. I said, who's in? And out of the 33 people, how many people, Ryan, do you think said, let's go for it? I'm in. Take a guess. 33
5.
people that are the most brilliant guys in internet marketing.
5.
5. Okay, here's the actual number. 0. Now, I thought what any of you would think, they must be thinking, man, this is a great opportunity. I don't want to blow this. You know, I'll get back to you on this. And I left there going, okay, I'm kind of surprised a couple of people didn't just jump right away on it, but we'll wait. And it finally, I kept waiting and waiting. And then I called back, and you know what? 2 weeks later, or excuse me, 10 days later, I reached out to John. I said, John, I got these guys. I'm presenting what the issue is. They're doing the research, the due diligence. We want to make sure this is right. I want to make sure that we have a fit for you. Can I get, I'll get back to you in another week. I knew he was busy too. And I did that. And you know what? These guys didn't jump on it. And I don't want to work with people who aren't going to see the opportunity and seize that, right? They don't have to say, I'm all in. They just need to say, hey, let's talk. Tell me more. That's another thing too, that I want to know. I want people, when I'm talking to them about stuff, I want them to ask me. I want them to say, tell me more. Okay. That, by the way, is something where I was just on the phone coaching call with one of my Hong Kong clients. You want to lead with questions where you're short, you're brief, you have an intention, you don't give too much away when you're talking, but that person you're talking to ask you, that's interesting. I'm fascinated. Tell me more. So they're telling you how much more you can add on to that part of your conversation. And that's what you want because they're interested. So the bottom line, here's what happened, you guys. None of them jumped on it in time. I kept the conversations going with John. I pulled in a couple of other things, but found out that these guys and their technology from another group that I was dealing with were full of crap. Do your due diligence, you guys. Nothing worse for you if you believe what the other people are always telling you, no matter what the relationship is. You present something that's bullshit and you didn't know it, you believed it, and then those other people find out. It hurts your reputation, okay? That's where you got to pay attention to. And that's what these guys were doing, another group. And when I called them out on it, they folded like a flower at night, man. It was just like, okay, this guy's on to us. So what happened during the course, during a couple of months, nothing happened with my War Room guys, and I couldn't figure it out. John left the company. John reached out to me. He said, hey, I got a job offer. I'm kind of burned out on this. I need to explore my horizons. So I just wanted to let you know, and let's stay in touch. Okay, I still have a relationship with this guy. When 2 years later, Roland Frazier became a partner with the guys that started War Room. Roland's a very dear friend of mine, and we're walking, and I said, Roland, something's been eating in my gut for 2 years, and I don't know why I waited so long to ask really about it, but it was because I moved on to the next thing, and that's another thing. Figure out when, just move on. Okay. There's a serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Letting go does not mean you're giving up. It just means you're letting go and moving on. So when I asked Roland, what happened? Why didn't anybody jump on this? And he goes, you know what? Because you scared them. Right? What do you mean I scared them? I know these are all friends. No. Virgin, you talked about Virgin Mobile, you talked about Richard Branson and a $10 billion company. And as good as they all were, $10 billion company, what do you think ran in their mind? What if it doesn't work? What if I'm a fraud? What if I can't do this? Imposter syndrome, even with the top guys, I've dealt with imposter syndrome. Okay. So I looked at Roland and I was confused, but I said, really? And he goes, yeah, it's a $10 billion company. None of these guys have done anything. They never dealt with a $1 billion company, $100 million company. And I said, but Roland, it's only commas and zeros. Remember that, you guys. Any deal you ever come into, that no matter what it looks like, it's only commas and zeros. They can't hurt you. Don't let the numbers scare you, unless they are numbers that show you in the metrics that you do not want to do the deal because it doesn't make sense. But if it's just a big deal, it's no big deal to move forward, to bring the people together. You all have a connection right here. And by the way, Ryan is a super connector as well. Okay. Ryan has brought me into some things where there hasn't been an opportunity yet, and there are opportunities. So make sure that when you're doing this, when you're hanging out with your network, that you do that. And this is something I'm going to ask you to do too. When you're around people, no matter who they are, I want you to remember this one. This is a new one that I came up with. And by the way, the title of my new book is going to be called Alphabet Soup, and it's going to be filled with all these different acronyms to be able to use as one and 2-page hacks of using the acronyms in the alphabet, right? So, but the one that I came up with the other day is called G as in gold, C, S. C as in Charlie, S as in Sam. And that stands for growing, contracting, or same. So when you start to evaluate the people in your world that you're around, ask yourself this: is this relationship with this person or people or group, is this allowing me to grow, or am I contracting when I'm around these people, or am I remaining the same? And if the answer is any of the last two, I would suggest to you that you reevaluate where you're at and how much time you spend with those people or that organization. Because if it's contracting, it's definitely a negative. But if it's just staying the same and you're not evolving and you're not growing and you're not getting more opportunities, I don't want to say it's a negative, but it's not adding to the growth of where you're going and what you want to do and how you can get there. And it doesn't matter whether you're 19 years old or if you're 80 years old. All of this stuff can be done by all of us because we are human interactors. It's all about relationships. Greg Reed and I started writing a book that we got distracted on, and I call it LOR, L-O-R, leveraging our relationships. Leverage your relationships, but always be giving. Make sure that you're coming from that place. So anyway, Ryan, I've gone way over on this thing. Please forgive me. I think we're almost out of time, actually.
You're rocking. Do you have 5 more minutes, Mark? 6 minutes?
I have as much time as you want. I don't have my next call for another hour and 11 minutes.
All right. Well, I did make a commitment of this meeting being 11 more minutes, so we'll hold it to that. Does anyone have questions for Mark?
No, they're bored already. I already see all I see is you all put on your regular, play of your faces on there.
So I've got a question, Mark. Yeah, that's my thing to figure out. So you're a great giver. How do you transition from giver to paid service provider or equity service provider? And then what do you do if the equity doesn't convert? Do you always make sure you're getting paid?
Well, that's a good question. So with that, I don't like if come is if the company that brings you in is going to make money, you get paid. And that doesn't work for me. So what I do is I'll get to a point where I'll give some really solid stuff. No expectations of a deal or getting anything on that, knowing that if I give and I know it's solid information, that people will most likely want to know, how do we do something? That's the question I always want them to ask. How do we work together? How do we hire you? How do we work together? And so I know that I've got something there. And what I will tell them, I go, okay, well, here's what it is. And I also let people know, listen, I'm free to, I give freely to a point, but if we continue past this point, that means we're going into a different phase of this relationship. And in that particular situation, now we need to look at how compensation works. Okay, so now I've already managed their expectation. I gave freely, I didn't expect anything. Now I'm at this point, they're wanting more, and then they'll let me know. I go, okay, if we move forward, then and if they ask, okay, what's that look like? What's it look like to have to hire you? What's it look like if you want to get involved in our project? And I like consulting for equity, but I also like to have a retainer, a small retainer. So like I got a tech company out of Vancouver, and they offered me 1% equity in their company. They had a valuation of between 150 million and $200 million. So that's a 1.5 to $2 million on paper, right? On paper, it doesn't mean anything until something happens. So I look at that, and I had 1 year to perform my side, which I could perform literally in 10 days. But I've been waiting because I wasn't comfortable with what they were doing with it. And when I was giving them suggestions, they'd say they loved them, but they weren't enacting them, right? And so it was being detrimental. So I looked at them and I said, look, here's the thing. We need to change this. I need you to put money. I need you to have some skin in the game so that you're paying attention, because those who pay attention. And I said, I don't want a lot, because frankly, I don't want to, if you pay me a lot, I got to give you more of my time, and I don't want to give you more of my time. And so when you're looking at how much equity you may take in a business and how much of a retainer you want to take, you may be, if they told you, hey, we'll pay you $10,000 a month as a retainer. Awesome. What are their expectations for $10,000 a month? I can tell you, if I'm paying somebody 10 grand a month plus giving them equity, I want them, when I pick up the phone, I want them available, and I don't want to be on the beck and call, and it reduces the amount of deals I can do. I would rather have a little piece in a lot of different deals, knowing that only a few of them. So if I had 10 different deals I'm part of, I know maybe 1 or 2 of them are going to hit a home run. That's all I need. I don't care. But it really gives me that time so that I'm not getting, because time is precious to me. I'll share this with you. One more thing. PFM, people, fun, money. This is what I do every time I look at a deal. Who are the people involved? Do I like the people? Are they serving who are the people they are serving? Okay. Are they getting benefit? The second part is always in this order. Is the project going to be fun? And are you going to be fun to do it with? Because if the answer is no to either one of those, it is a hard pass. I'm out. I want to have fun when I'm doing my deals. And then the third one is money. What's the clear path of monetization? And that does not mean I am in. If you satisfy, that means tell me more. But it helps me to identify really, really fast. Do I want to be involved with these people? Because if they don't pass PFM, it's a pass. You know, I didn't waste all my time. Doesn't mean we can't be friends. But as you're doing that, remember that the more equity and the more retainer you get, the more that's expected out of you. Are you prepared to give that up? And I will tell you, by my mistakes, where I've taken the big side and gotten so involved in projects, and even though I was getting paid really well on a monthly, they never panned out, and I lost all these other opportunities. Massive.
Thank you, Mark. We got time for one more question. 6 minutes, George.
You hear me? Thanks for your time, Mark Anthony. I enjoyed listening to you. It seems to me that you're the face of your company, obviously, and you're probably the revenue based on that talk. How much of your business do you have to outsource, and are you really good at that skill as well?
Yes and yes. I outsource a lot of it. Okay, but I'm I do my due diligence on who I outsource it with, what people I'll partner with. So like I brought up Roland Fraser, I've got a deal right now where this company's offered me a pretty good chunk of it. I like it's in the stem cell industry. And I made sure that I was getting enough that I can bring in other people and split up that, right? Because Roland brings in so much massive value in his relationships, doing mergers and acquisitions. He's a former tax attorney, all these different things. So again, I'd rather have a smaller amount. So I'm going to outsource to people that they can see an upside, that I can give them equity, that I'm being very upfront with them. But I believe, and I talk about this all the time, outsource your weaknesses. I don't want to get a lot better at a lot of other things. I want to be able to be really good at what I do and find other people who can do the other heavy lifting for me, do it really, really well. And Ryan, I'm happy to send you some stuff for the group sometime on a couple of other things so that you can have, so you guys have some other resources on what I do, how I do it. And if any of it is of value of you, great, use it, take it away. The only thing I ask you to do is if you find something that I share with you that is valuable, you don't have to give me credit for it, but please, when you run into somebody that you like, you care about, share it with them. Okay. Again, I'm not looking for authorship. I just want to make change. If you find something that helps you and it works for you, share it with others so that they can benefit too. That's the best way I can get what I do out.
I think two things that you shared with me, Mark, that were super valuable is one, which is so, could be viewed as trivial, but every time we went somewhere, or as a coffee shop or whatever it was,
I know where you're going.
you would introduce yourself to the host and you would acknowledge specifically what they are doing. And you would tell them, thank you for doing what you do at such a high level, something along that lines, correct?
What I do, I think what you're referring to, Ryan, is what I'm known for, and some people get entertained and other people may get annoyed, but I won't stop doing it. I tell people, has anyone told you lately that you're appreciated? Okay, now you can, I think it's important we thank people. We use words like thank you and please, right? But when you tell people that they are appreciated, it's a whole different level. And the change that you will see that will happen if you get into the habit of saying that, hey, without expecting something, has anyone told you lately that you're appreciated? I've literally seen visceral reactions where people, the first time I ever did this, and LAX, the woman started to weep. She literally wept. She hugged me. She cried. I had multiple emotions. I said, wow, such simple words, well-meaning words could have this reaction to help somebody feel that. But the other side of me felt, oh my God, that this woman feels so unappreciative that she doesn't hear that she has to weep because she doesn't do that. Don't take for granted that people in our life or people in the service industry or anywhere else that you go, when you say that, I will challenge you to do this for the next week. Do it at least once a day. If you're at Starbucks at the barista, if you see your mail person delivering mail, wherever you are, just look at them and look them straight in the eye, say it from your heart and say, hey, has anyone told you lately that you're appreciated? If you don't get an amazing reaction from at least multiple of them, I'd be surprised. Okay.
Thank you, Mark. And you've like literally taught me so many things. So I will definitely look out for those materials. Yeah, and you brought so much value to this audience. We've got a bunch of marketing and sales consultants and business owners. So I'm just so grateful you gave us our time today.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm happy I'll send it to you, Ryan. You can look through it. And if you find stuff that could be useful for the rest of the people on the call and anybody else, share it with them.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, man. I don't come from a scarcity mindset. I share the stuff that I have. And when I learn something from somebody else, I give them credit for it. I don't, even people I don't like, but I still will give them credit if that's where I learned it.
Sure. And just the escrow thing. If we had more time, I would touch on, looking at taking escrows for your retainers or your stock compensation. Because that's something I learned from Mark. And a lot of givers, they tend to be taken advantage of. So anyways, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate your time, man. Enjoy Palm
For
Desert.
having me. Appreciate it. Sorry I went a little over.
All right, brother. Take care, man.
Thank you
care,
very
all.
much.
Good one. Thank you.
It
Thank
was a
you, Mark.
pleasure.
All right, guys, let's come together and give each other a virtual hug. And like Mark, I believe that it is our responsibility to impact one life on any given day. And that can be a hug, a smile, a laugh, an acknowledgement, like Mark said. And it's amazing the way you change someone else's day. So thank you guys. Appreciate the 2 hours you spent with us, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.